Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hi everyone, my name is Nisrina Ramadhani. This is my student number. I'm from class 1E, Psychology. In this video, I would like to explain and tell story about history's most influential psychology. It was some 2,500 years ago when the great Athenian philosophers Plato and Aristotle became the first Westerners to ponder the mysteries of life from a psychological point of view. But it wasn't until the 18th century, shortly after the illustrious French medical doctor Pierre Cabanis began to talk about the science of man, that the field of psychology was recognized as a leading scientific field of study. Although the history of the discipline is very short compared to many other leading academic subjects in the world, this doesn't mean that the evolution of the field has been slow. In fact, since the late 180s, each passing decade has seen the rise of a number of influential psychologists who have systematically improved our understanding of the brain and human behavior. Thanks to the work of these legendary figures who have conceptualized a variety of enduringly significant psychological theories. In addition to a valuable base of psychological approaches, the field has not only become one of the world's fastest growing, but also one of the most important, historically significant psychological figures coming from the schools of psychoanalysis, behaviorism, humanistic, and cognitive, while simultaneously outlining the evolutionary path of the field. First, psychology's earliest influencers. The first one, William James. Whereas Wilhelm Wundt is rightfully thought of as the father of the broader psychological field, the late great William James is more specifically remembered as the founding father of American psychology. Of course, this is because it wasn't long after the aforementioned Wundt taught the first university psychology course on European soil and wrote the discipline's first important book when James followed a path remarkably similar to his colleague from across the pond. It was in 1875, to be exact, when James taught the first American psychology course at a Harvard University, and in 1890s when he published what would become one of the field's earliest classics, The Principles of Psychology. In addition to this important pioneering work, the man, some believe, did more for the discipline than any other 19th century figure, systematically laid the field's groundwork by researching and theorizing about topics such as emotions, habits, consciousness, and free will. Moreover, the functionalist approach James relied upon to study the brain and human behavior, which aims to discover the reasons why humans develop their current psychological characteristics. Eventually, morphed into the distinguished branch of evolutionary psychology. For his contributions to the field, the American Psychology Association ranked James 40 on their list of the top 100 eminent psychologists of the 20th century. Second, there is Sigmund Freud. There is perhaps not a single individual who is impact on the field of psychology and the world at large can match that of the iconic Austrian psychologist Sigmund Freud. While many of his most notable theories on topics such as the ego, sexual libido, and the relationship between a mother and child, for example, have been shortly criticized and truly debunked by the influential psychologists who came after him, there is little doubt that his work remains important and his historical influence will forever hold weight. Moreover, although some of history's most important psychological movements originated out of opposition to Freud's work, the polarizing psychologist mentored a number of other historical notable psychologists including Alfred Adler, Carl Jung, and his daughter Anna Freud. In stark contrast to some of his most famous yet faulted theories, a number of Freud's other notable contributions forever transformed the direction of the field and our approach to treating mental health disorders. It was around the turn of the 20th century, which is referred to as Freud's century by some, when the iconic psychologist developed his psychodynamic therapeutic approach that is built upon the premise of patients talking openly about their problems with their therapist. Additionally, the overarching concept of his unconscious mind theory, which tell us various memories, thoughts, and feelings remain out of one's awareness, yet influence their behavior, has stood the test of time as being true. Eminent behavioral psychologists. Number 1, there is Ivan Pavlov. Throughout the 150-year history of psychological exploration, few experiments have stood the test of time as being truly groundbreaking, and even fewer that have used animals as the subject of the research. Undoubtedly, one such experiment that was carried out by the great Russian psychologist Ivan Pavlov. It was during the later years of the 19th century when Pavlov accidentally discovered classical conditioning, the term used to describe the process of unintentionally developing habitual biological response to previously neutral stimuli in the environment while he was studying the psychology of digestion in his pet dogs. The famed discovery occurred when Pavlov began noticing his canines secreting saliva whenever they saw an assistant researcher whom they associated with being fed. From this observation, the great psychologist and his team shifted the focus of their research to determine if previously unknown environmental cues, a bell, could become associated with future events, being fed, in a way that creates involuntary conditioned reactions, salivation. It was largely due to Pavlov's research, which made its way to the Western world in the early 1900, that the behavioral branch of psychology was established. For his discovery, Pavlov, who was one of the first researchers to advocate for the human treatment of experimental animals, was awarded with the Nobel Prize for Psychology or Medicine in 1904. Second one, there is B.F. Skinner. While there were a number of influential psychologists who helped develop and popularize behavioral psychology, the man who unquestionably became the face of the movement was B.F. Skinner. Similar to Ivan Pavlov, who made an important discovery about the development of habitual behavior that stood the test of time, so too did Skinner with his theory of operant conditioning. Whereas the iconic Russian psychologist's discovery related to involuntary biological response and neutral environmental stimuli, however, the immortalized American's findings revealed a distinctive type of conditioning that develops when individuals learn to associate positive and negative outcomes with their actions. Over time, this association, which encourage and discourage particular behavior, are strengthened through what Skinner called reinforcement. To study and verify his theory of operant conditioning, the famed Harvard psychologist developed an experimental apparatus known as the Skinner box, which allowed him to test and monitor animals as they interact with their environment. Thanks to his work, numerous professional and educational organizations still rely upon Skinner's theory to motivate their employees and students. In addition to operant conditioning, Skinner also developed a number of other behavioral theories and published 21 books, including his 1938 Psychology Classic, The Behavior of Organism, and his 1948 novel, Walden, to which was based upon his scientific research. Although many of his behavioral hypotheses have fallen out of favor since he passed away, Skinner's contribution to the field, honorary degrees, and awards speak for themselves. In fact, his career was so impactful that some believe him to be the most influential psychologist of 20th century. Iconic humanistic psychologists. The first one, there is Carl Rogers. When examining the psychological contributions made by history's most influential psychologists, it becomes clear to see that few individuals have been able to impact the field like Carl Rogers. Not only is late great American psychologist considering to be one of the founding father of humanistic psychology and therefore a grandfather figure of positive psychology, he also revolutionized the field with his person-centered therapeutic approach, while the great minds before him had confidence in diagnosing their patients and prescribing solutions to fix their problems. With almost a sense of arrogant superiority, Rogers' approach, which was outlined in his highly acclaimed 1951 book, Client-Centered Therapy, was based upon the belief that the psychologist and clients are equals. Therefore, instead of making assumptions based upon the limited amount of time they spend with their patients, Rogers advocated for listening, understanding, and guiding them towards the discovery of their own answers. In addition to establishing humanistic psychology and developing client-centered therapy, which remains widely utilized in therapeutic, educationally, and industrial settings, Carl Rogers offered valuable insights on human development, personality, incongruence, and acceptance throughout his career. The immortalized psychologist wrote 19 books in total, including on becoming a person in 1961 and a way of being in 1980, served as the president of American Psychological Association and received numerous awards. Yet still, what is perhaps Rogers' most impressive accomplishment was that he was nominated for the 1987 Nobel Peace Prize, which was awarded to none other than Mother Teresa for working to resolve a conflict between South Africa and Ireland. The second one, there is Abraham Maslow. Throughout modern history, there have been a plethora of iconic figures coming from a wide variety of backgrounds who have rose above distressing life circumstances to inspire others and bring positive change to the world. As was the case with Abraham Maslow, it was the disheartening years of his youth, and later the devastating effects of the Second World War that gave rise to modest yet brilliant man. Although he didn't have a supportive environment at home, dealt with anti-Semitic racism throughout the younger years of his life, and even was diagnosed as being mentally unstable by a therapist. The now immortalized humanistic psychology was able to transform the field by shining light on humans' positive traits. Unquestionably, Maslow's most notable contribution came in the form of his hierarchy of needs theory, which systematically outlines the psychological needs an individual must appease in order to achieve the ultimate human desire to realize one's full potential, or what Maslow called self-actualization. Beyond his human-celebrated insights on psychological needs and self-actualization, Abraham Maslow will forever be considered as one of the founding fathers of humanistic psychology, alongside Carl Rogers, because his theories and on-peak experiences, wholesome mental states, and personal growth serve as a foundational elements of the approach. Furthermore, the great American psychologist books Hierarchy of Needs, Theory of Human Motivation, and Toward a Psychology of Being, published in 1943 and 1963, respectively, are considered as two of psychology's true classics. For his contribution to the field, Maslow was named as the Humanist of the Year in 1967 by the American Humanist Association, and still to this day has an award bearing his name that is nationally based out by the American Psychological Association, on why he ultimately decided to focus on the positive attributes of humans. For his contribution to the field, Maslow was named as the Humanist of the Year in 1967 by the American Humanist Association, and still to this day has an award bearing his name that is annually bestowed out by American Psychological Association. Distinguished cognitive psychologists. The first one, there is Albert Bandura. While there is no denying the fact that he distinguished American psychologist Albert Bandura played a major role in stoking the cognitive revolution and subsequently shifting the field's dominant perspective from behavioral to cognitive. His numerous contributions have spanned across a 60-plus year career, and much of his most important work has occurred after cognitive psychology was formalized as one of discipline's major branches. Bandura first became a household name in 1961 after conducting his now legendary Bobodol experiment that showed how children learn behaviors by observing and imitating older adults. From this research, the influential social-cognitive psychologist developed the social learning theory, which he later expanded to give a more comprehensive view of the relationship between cognitions and socially learned behaviors, and renamed as the social cognitive theory. Some years later, in the 1970s, the now 92-year-old Bandura, who is considered by many to be the greatest living psychologist, switched his focus and began studying the role beliefs play on individuals' capacity to manage situations and act in ways that produce the most desirable outcomes. From his work, Bandura developed his theory of self-efficacy, which tells us that one's own beliefs about their abilities largely determine the likelihood of their success. For the contribution he is made throughout his illustrious career, Albert Bandura has been bestowed out with numerous honorary degrees and awards, including the United States' most prestigious scientific award, the National Medal of Science. The second one, there is Albert Ellis. Just as the aforementioned Albert Bandura can be considered as one of the truly distinguished figures of the cognitive revolution, so too can the iconic American psychologist is Albert Ellis. Similarly, just as Bandura's work impacted the field far beyond the initial passes of the field's evolutions toward cognitive psychology, so too has the work of the man psychology today proclaimed as having the greatest impact on modern psychotherapy. It was in the late 1940s when Ellis, who believed that each of us can cultivate happiness and fulfillment within ourselves, broke away from the conventional therapeutic approach of psychoanalysis and began developing a new method that blended cognitive, emotional, and behavioral strategies. By the mid-1950s, the iconic psychologist had gone public with his new approach, Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, or REBT, and began teaching it to other therapists. Although his new therapeutic strategy, which he continued to tinker with until he passed away, was met with fierce resistance from the traditional psychotherapeutic establishment throughout the 1950s. Ellis wouldn't be discouraged, and as his approach gained evidence-based validity, he would soon become one of the field's most influential figures. In the following decade, the famed psychologist, who also played a prominent role in the American sexual revolution, began his next monumental project by working with the late great psychiatrist Aaron T. Beck. While the latter is generally considered the founding father of cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, which is one of the most effective therapeutic approach today, the method's foundation was largely built upon the former's ideas. For the immense contribution he made to the field, Albert Ellis has been bestowed out with numerous awards and remains considered one of history's most influential psychologists. Maybe that's all from me. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. See ya!